You're listening to a completely new season of Limbic Light podcast with Manisha Blunchley and co-host David Niven Miller. In this season, we'll be discussing slightly controversial, extremely useful topics designed to help and empower you with knowledge about simple products and methods to make you healthier in completely natural, safe, effective and affordable ways. I've titled this season Unspoken Truths, as the information you'll receive is information which is so often hard to find and sometimes blatantly hidden from us. So, welcome. So, hello everyone again. We are very fortunate to be speaking with David Miller once again on a fantastic topic. It's zinc, and we're calling it the mineral that nearly everyone needs. It's a very big topic, and we're hoping to be able to squeeze as much information into this short period as possible. Some of the things that we will be talking about is what is zinc, about the fact that most people are deficient in zinc, some of the symptoms of zinc deficiency, and how to test to see whether you're zinc deficient, and also the possibility of having too much zinc, a condition called Pyroluria, some of the food sources of zinc, and also how to take zinc. So, David, welcome again.
Thank you, Manisha. Good to be here.
So let's launch straight in. Can you give us a bit of a description of what zinc actually is?
Yes, zinc's an element, and all of us need quite a lot, more than is generally recognized in the medical system's dietary reference intake. The dietary reference intake for women is 8 milligrams per day of zinc, and for men is 11 milligrams per day. But this is just the minimal amount for basic health. The optimal amount is definitely higher than that, and most people are not even getting the minimal amount. 1 in 3 Americans get less than the RDI of zinc, and the majority of Americans, and probably Australians and other people around the world, are getting less than they need for optimal health. Zinc is involved in so many enzymes and in so many processes in the body that if you're zinc deficient, it's actually very difficult to connect the dots and work out that it's a zinc deficiency that's causing some kind of ailment, as opposed to other deficiencies and other conditions.
That's very interesting, because I was looking through the list of all the different parts of the body or types of symptoms that may be affected by zinc deficiency, and virtually there was nothing that I could see that wasn't affected. The brain, the psychology, the fertility, the skin, the hormones, digestion. So it's really diverse,
muscle strength, immune system, it just goes on and on. So if you're zinc deficient, it's almost impossible to work out that you're zinc deficient from various symptoms. And the best thing to do with regard to zinc is there's a simple zinc test that you can do. It's not terribly scientific, but it's the cheapest, quickest, most efficient way of doing a basic test, and it's the zinc taste test. What you do is get a glass of water and put some liquid zinc sulfate solution into the water, and then drink the water and see how it tastes. Now, if it tastes slightly sweet or not much taste at all, or it's pleasant, then you're most likely zinc deficient. If this zinc sulfate solution tastes strongly minerally, metallic, unpleasant, cloying, astringent, if it's not pleasant, then you're in the rare situation where you're zinc sufficient. How do you do this taste test? Where do you get liquid zinc sulfate? In fact, quite a few chemists will do the test for you, or naturopaths will have it available to do the test for you. You can do it yourself if you've got some zinc sulfate available, but it's widely available. Liquid zinc sulfate is widely available. If you do a little bit of investigation, you can find somebody to do the test for you. There are other tests that you can do, but all of them are difficult and unreliable and a lot more of a hassle and expense. So I would recommend doing the zinc sulfate liquid test.
I do remember myself doing this test quite often for my clients in the clinic. We called it the zinc tally test, and we got our liquid solution from Metagenics, and we did it slightly differently. I would give the person, I think it was 5 mils, which was about a teaspoon, neat, straight in the mouth, and I would get them to count to 10. And I would get them to observe any taste or sensation in their mouth that they would get, and approximately where in that count of 10 that they would get it. And if there was virtually nothing at all, or towards the very end, very mild, towards the 10, then they were very deficient. But if they immediately got a very strong sensation or taste, usually metallic or furry on the tongue, their zinc levels were quite good and quite strong. That's how I used to do it. So, yeah, I agree with you that the taste test is simple, effective, even though it's so-called not so scientific. It's very reliable, I think, anyway.
Yeah, it's a quick and easy test, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about some of the symptoms, because they're really diverse, that a person could be experiencing if they had a zinc deficiency.
Well, the first test that most naturopaths use is white spots on your fingernails. And I don't think it's a particularly valuable test. If you're seriously deficient in zinc, and you were seriously deficient at some time in the last few months, you may have a white spot on your fingernails. But you can be deficient in zinc and not have white spots on your fingernails. So I don't think that's a particularly reliable or good symptom to look at. But the general symptoms of zinc deficiency, they're just so wide-ranging. A weaker immune system, deteriorating sense of taste and smell, that's actually quite a good indication, because zinc is importantly involved in your taste and smell.
That's so interesting too, because of post-COVID or long COVID that they're terming. One of the symptoms that they most often get is loss of taste and smell. And I've often thought that people would get the COVID more strongly if they're zinc deficient. And so following up to that, having the loss of taste and smell after having that sort of infection may be really linked back to a zinc deficiency.
There is a connection there. Absolutely. I agree. So taste and smell. And then I'll just read through a list of some of the others, and you'll see how diverse it is. Hair loss, chronic inflammation or systemic inflammation in the body, slow healing of wounds, all sorts of skin problems ranging from acne to seborrheic dermatitis to eczema to psoriasis, varicose veins, skin infections, all sorts of problems with a weaker immune system, susceptibility to colds and flus and viruses and bacterial infections, susceptibility to yeast and fungal infections, cardiovascular problems. Zinc is involved in the flexibility of blood vessels. So insufficient zinc causes a hardening of blood vessels, particularly arteries, high blood pressure. So increased risk of strokes, heart attacks, cardiovascular problems. Zinc's involved with your vision. So if you have deteriorating eyesight, night blindness, macular degeneration,
goodness gracious,
all sorts of other visual problems, digestive problems, involved in all sorts of aspects of digestion, including having good stomach acidity, it just continues hormonal production, hormonal balance, production of connective tissue, ligaments, tendons, tendinitis, bursitis.
Goodness
It's involved
gracious.
with the brain, psychology, all kinds of brain and psychological problems.
Yeah,
It's involved with the reproductive system.
Yes. Now that's one of the
male and female reproductive system. Importantly, in men, one of the richest parts, or where the part of the body where there's the highest level of zinc, is in the prostate. So sufficient zinc is very important for prostate health. And when a man ejaculates, he loses a significant amount of zinc. So zinc, the list I've just read through is it's
extensive.
Zinc really is an important part of the entire body.
I remember when I was working a lot with women with fertility issues, and I would always recommend zinc as well, or test at least, because that was a very common nutrient that was deficient. I was quite interested to see there on the list brain and psychology. I was aware of a lot of the skin and immunity and things like that, but I wasn't aware that zinc would actually play a function in even anxiety and a few other mental health conditions.
There's
surprise.
There is a widespread insufficiency in zinc in most people today, and there's also a huge amount of mental and psychological problems. And one of the first things, if somebody's got any kind of psychological problem or diagnosed mental problem, one of the first things is to test for zinc sufficiency and iodine sufficiency. They're two quick, easy tests. And getting sufficiency in micronutrients, particularly zinc and particularly iodine, it's an amazingly fast and complete remedy. It's as simple as that.
So incredible, isn't it, to know that and to try that first before you go down the avenue of trying stronger medications that may have side effects.
Absolutely. It's such a quick and simple and important to test before you do anything else.
That's so good. And what struck me as I was going through the list and you were going through the list was that with what's happening in the world at the moment with COVID, with vaccine injuries, with a lot of heart-related strokes and heart attacks, mental health, immune problems with all the viruses, zinc seems to come a trumpet as far as coming on top as probably the number one mineral that we all need in these times with all the issues, these current issues that are going on.
Yes. Yep. Zinc is probably the number one mineral, and vitamin D, I call it a vitamin, although it's really a hormone. But vitamin D sufficiency and zinc, if you're sufficient in those two micronutrients, you'll be way ahead of the curve. You'll just be so much stronger and more resilient.
That's so good to know. And before we go into finding out about what types of zinc to take, can you just run through a few of the food sources that people might be able to tap into to get their zinc levels higher naturally?
Yes. The richest source of zinc by far is oysters. And there's not any, I'm not aware of any research showing quite why oysters accumulate zinc so voraciously and more efficiently than anything else. But oysters are the number one thing to go for if you can. Some other shellfish and seafood are also rich in zinc. And generally, if you have a diet that's rich in different forms of seafood and fish, you're much less likely to be zinc deficient. In fact, you're probably okay. And then moving on to the land, red meat is a good source of zinc, especially if that red meat comes from animals that are generally free-ranging. So red meat from an animal that is eating its natural diet. So ideally, red meat from grass-fed, free-ranging, more organic type bred animals rather than feedlot animals. But red meat is a good source of zinc, and it's unfortunate that with the huge pressure and move towards veganism, vegetarianism, but particularly veganism today, vegans in particular are at risk of being zinc deficient. And the reason is that vegetable or vegetarian sources of zinc are somewhat limited. It's very difficult to get zinc sufficiency on a truly vegan diet. Vegetable sources of zinc are pepitas, that's pumpkin seeds. They're the richest vegetable source of zinc. But there are a couple of other seeds and nuts that also have some level of zinc in them. But the unfortunate thing is that if you're on a vegan diet, many vegan foods, seeds and nuts and so on, have anti-nutrients in them. So they make it quite difficult to digest and absorb zinc and get most of the zinc out of it. So
it might be more important.
It's a good idea if you're on a vegan diet to test your zinc or monitor your zinc levels, and you may have to supplement with it.
Yes.
And just a little aside there, that indicates to me that a vegan diet is actually not a good diet to be on long term. It's not what humans evolved on, but that's a conversation for another day. But I do make the point that zinc is very important in your general health, and being a vegan makes that difficult to achieve.
I did read in the list as well that possibly kelp might be another source, or salt, really good quality salt might also supply some levels of zinc as well.
Yeah, high quality sea salt, kelp and some other seaweeds do have a level of zinc in them. Yes, you're correct. That's another direction you can go. But again, it's quite difficult to get zinc sufficiency just from sea salt and seaweed. It's not a rich source of zinc like red meat and like seafoods. So
coming to the whole topic of supplementation, what are your recommendations on how to supplement, how much to supplement? Yeah, what forms?
Yeah, on my website, there's a page I've written on zinc, and it has some details on supplementation. But generally the best way to supplement would be with zinc sulfate. I've found that a lot of zinc tablets, if you go into your supermarket, there's a whole shelf of different zinc tablets, and nearly all of them are not very absorbable. I do recommend taking liquid zinc if you're going to supplement, and taking it depends on whether you're a male or female, but generally 10 to 15 milligrams of elemental zinc per day. But it depends on your zinc test before you do it. So I've got a little bit more detail on exactly what to do on the web page, but that's the general approach. Test and see how much you probably need.
So in case the listeners are wondering, the website that David's referring to is growyouthful.com. There's a whole lot of useful information there, and you'll be able to look under remedies and look for zinc, and you'll be able to find that information. Just on another regarding taking tablets versus liquid, I've found both for myself and many other people that I've spoken to, when they do take a tablet form, they tend to get nauseous very easily from taking tablet form, whereas it doesn't seem to happen with the liquid form, which to me indicates that it's also a little bit harsh on the stomach. Maybe it's not being absorbed properly. So I would agree with you about supplementing with liquid form. That's what I've been doing for the last 6 months, and I much prefer taking it that way.
Yes, I agree. In fact, generally I'm against using supplements, and the rows and rows of tablets that you see in most supermarkets now, I don't believe they're of any value generally, and a lot of them are harmful. So stay away from supplementation if you possibly can. Most people do not need to take tablet supplements of the kind that you buy in a supermarket. I really don't recommend that at all. There's one other point I want to make with regard zinc supplementation, and that's an ailment. You mentioned it earlier.
Yes.
It's called pyroluria. Pyroluria is not recognized by the medical profession. So if you go and see your doctor and you start talking about pyroluria, your doctor will not recognize it or have much to say about it. But about 10 to 15% of all people suffer from pyroluria. And it's a situation where your liver is not working properly, and you're likely to excrete more zinc than most people. So you'll lose zinc in your body, and you need to supplement with zinc and also with vitamin B6. Now, there's a web page on Grow Youthful with regard to pyroluria. It's spelled Pyroluria. It's so widespread. As I said, 10 to 15% of all people suffer from it.
That's a lot.
So it's there's a. I don't really want to turn to pyroluria now as a subject of our discussion, but the web page gives you the symptoms of pyroluria and how to supplement. And again, you need to supplement with zinc, but you also need to add in a little bit of vitamin B6. And if you've been suffering from symptoms of pyroluria all your life, you can literally cure this problem within 24 hours by starting zinc supplementation. So that's 1 in 10 or more, 1.5 in 10 are likely to be suffering without knowing about pyroluria.
That's so interesting. And they might be getting a whole wide range of conditions without knowing where it's coming from. So
exactly.
One of the questions I had for you, David, was there's mention of how deficient our soils are in zinc. And it's one of the reasons why our plants that we grow don't have decent levels of zinc. And I was thinking, well, shouldn't there be a way that we can re-supplement, especially if we're growing our own food, to put zinc back into the soil so that the food, the vegetables we're growing has higher levels? Do you have any ideas on what could be done there?
Yes. Zinc is one of the elements that you can put back in the soil. So you've got to be very careful about putting different elements in the soil because sometimes it can backfire. But if you go into your nursery, you can actually find, it's usually zinc sulfate or some other zinc salt that's available to spray onto plants, usually citrus, and you can also put zinc sulfate in your soil. So if you have a home garden, that's something I recommend that you do. It's valuable, and it'll mean that what you're growing in your own garden will start to have a significant and good level of zinc in it. Now, the problem with food that comes off most farms today is that a lot of agriculture can grow crops. So we're talking about grains in particular, but a wide variety of other vegetables and fruits that can be zinc deficient, but which still look good. So particularly talking about grains, they're grown in zinc deficient soils and they should have zinc in them, but the farmer doesn't have a financial incentive to correct their soil using zinc because it's expensive and the crops look pretty good anyway. So it's a real shame that most farmers are probably aware that their soils are zinc deficient, but there's not a financial incentive to correct this deficiency because the crops still look good.
That's so interesting. I have another question for you, and that's in regards to what might deplete our zinc levels. For example, I used to tell my clients who were taking the contraceptive pill, women, that it was very common that their zinc levels would go down. I've also read that sugar might interfere or stress. Could you just comment on some of the things that might rob us of our natural zinc levels?
Yes, you just mentioned some of the most important. Sugar, high levels of sugar in your diet will nearly always result in zinc deficiency. And in fact, most people today have a diet that just has abusive levels of sugar in it. We'll talk about this in another interview, but most people today are sugar addicted. They have excess levels of sugar in their diet. They're eating frequently. They have a high blood sugar level all the time. And this abuse of sugar and this excess of sugar in our diets makes it very difficult to get zinc sufficiency. So that's one common reason for a zinc deficiency in most people. It's also involved in, you mentioned pharmaceutical drugs, the birth control pill and so on. Some other pharmaceuticals will interfere with zinc absorption. It's very difficult. Stress is another important one. With so many people being stressed today with the stressors in today's world, high levels of cortisol make it difficult to absorb zinc well. So
I would imagine also if a person is inflamed or fighting an infection, they may need more zinc, so they're using more zinc. So if they're in a state of chronic inflammation or chronic infection, possibly that would also rob their zinc levels as well. I don't know. Yes. That's what I suspect.
Yeah. So zinc deficiency is coming from different directions. Like most people are generally, foods are zinc deficient now because zinc is no longer recycled in the agricultural cycle. So soils are zinc deficient, foods are zinc deficient. People are generally eating more vegetarian or vegan type diets. We're stressed. We have a lot of anti-nutrients, things that make absorption of zinc difficult, chronic illness, inflammation.
So there's so many reasons.
It's just conspiring to us being zinc deficient.
So let's just do a really quick recap. We can pretty much assume that nearly everyone might be deficient in zinc unless they're taking really good levels of possibly eating oysters regularly and supplementing. So it's a good idea if you're uncertain and if you've got any of those symptoms which we rattled off, fertility issues, cardiac issues, inflammatory, psychological conditions, skin conditions, gosh, there's so many more, immune system problems, regular colds, just grab a test, a little zinc test, and see if you're deficient. And if so, the good zinc sulfate, is that correct? The liquid
zinc sulfate, yeah.
Zinc sulfate.
Good liquid zinc sulfate.
Which is inexpensive. It's not that much to purchase, and it's probably a good idea to do that. And then maybe in another 3 months, if you're concerned about getting too much zinc, do another little zinc tally test and just see how your levels are going. It's highly recommended, particularly for this day and age. So many viruses and things, immune issues lurking around. Yeah. We can't go wrong, I think. So I'm really glad we discussed this issue, David. It's hopefully our listeners will get something out of this, and maybe some of them may even be able to turn their health issues completely around by just taking this really simple, inexpensive measure. So thank you, David. I'll just remind everyone again, if you wanted to find out more about the zinc from David's website, it's growyouthful.com. And you'll find, as well as zinc, lots of other information there. So thank you, David.
Thank you, Manisha. Good to speak to you.
We'll be covering another topic very shortly next week on sugar addiction, beating sugar addiction. So make sure you tune in, everybody, for that. That's going to be very useful as well. So thanks, David, and bye, everyone.
Bye.